Hello everyone. So today I'll be presenting on publish on perish. Here I'm going to cover two components. One is how to write a manuscript and where can we submit that particular manuscript. So before we proceed on writing, I would first like to draw your attention towards one thing, which is like different kind of articles which can be published in a journal. One is a systematic review, different kinds of reviews, like I just mentioned, systematic, narrative, scoping. Another one which is very popularly published in journal article is a research article based on primary data, secondary data. Here you could see in Appetite, we have this a primary research published. Of course, besides these, there are two other articles, which could be published, I would say. One is a research brief and one is letter to the editor. They are a bit shorter in length as compared to a systematic review or a normal research article. Now, what are the important components of a research article? So first is an introduction where you generally talk about your existing scholarship, that is existing literature. Also, you talk about the rationale, why you want to do a particular study, and definitely identify the literature gap there. Moving on to the second section, which is methodology or methods or materials and methods. What do you discuss there? Generally, this section is divided into different subheadings. First subheading could be study design, which could include cross-sectional, longitudinal. If you're doing a qualitative research, so you write a qualitative research approach. Then you talk about study setting, sample, followed by data collection. Of course, you have to talk about the interview guide or the questionnaire. If you have used anything pre-validated, you do mention about that. And finally is the section on data analysis, where you talk about the different statistical tests used to analyze your data in case of quantitative. And if it's qualitative, we talk about the thematic analysis. You don't forget to mention the different software used for quantitative. If you are using SPSS data, mention that. And if you are using qualitative, you can mention the use of NVivo or Atlas T software if you are using. Now, moving on to results. That's a very important, whatever you have analyzed, you're going to present. A very important mistake which many of us do is, we put the data in our tables and then we, again write it actually in the text. So that's kind of a repetition. So try avoiding it. So if you're putting something in the table, try not writing it in your text as such. That's about results. Results is a section you generally don't include references because it's your own data. Moving on to the final section, the final leg of the manuscript, what we say, it's the discussion, where you actually compare your findings with the existing findings. So here you need to think, like you have to, give both the counter arguments as well as, parallel views, similar views, because sometimes when we see papers, particularly when I'm reviewing, I generally see similar views, parallel views, analogous views, comparable views. Very rarely, we see that, people do show in contrast, contradictory views, opposing views. So I think there has to be a balance of opinion in particularly in a discussion section. Some of the manuscripts in discussion section, ask you to talk about future research implications and policies for practice. So do include that. Before concluding, one must note that, no study is perfect. There are limitations. So please write down the limitation. Of course, your strengths also. And then you can have a concluding paragraph where you give a takeaway message or a research question for the reader to use. And definitely you have your references. Now, the first and foremost thing, how do you select a journal? Why do you have to select a journal at front? The reason being, because every journal has a particular guideline to write. So you need to follow that. So if you have a guideline in mind, the template is set, then it's easier for the author to write down the manuscript. Now, what is a good rule of thumb when you select journals? So one is, whatever journals you read, the often you cite them. For example, I've written a manuscript. Just go to the references and just see where are the maximum citations coming from. Let's say the maximum citations are coming from a journal called Appetite. So the high probability is that my work will be readable by readers who generally subscribe to Appetite. Another way is you can go to different websites. One is Jane. Then there are other publication websites like Elsevier has a journal finder, Springer has its own journal finder, where you generally put in your abstract as well as your study title, and they give you the journal options where you can submit. Once the journal is selected, you need to know the quality of the journal. How to assess? One is an impact factor, other could be a Scamargo journal ranking like a Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. I would prefer that you publish in Q1, Q2 because they're a better rank. Of course, reputation of publisher is important, starting from Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Cambridge, Oxford. Reputed publishers generally have good quality journals. And make sure that you don't fall in trap of predatory journals. Now, this is a screenshot I'm sharing here with you about the Jane website. So what I have done is I've taken an abstract from one of my recent manuscripts and posted, I would rather say pasted in this Jane feedback page. And there are different options. So option is find authors, find journals. So I clicked on the option find journals. So then Jane gave me a number of options. So these are the different journals. If you could see here, there is something highlighted in orange that shows us open access. So Jane actually gives us journals from different publishers. So why I prefer Jane over Elsevier's or Cambridge or Springer's journals? The reason is they only restrict to their own journals, whereas Jane has I would say a broader range. It will not, I would rather say it will not be a biased thing. Now coming to open access, when I said that orange thing, what is open access? For open access means the day your article gets published, from that day itself, it is available to all the readers. Whereas for a subscription article, which is not where you don't give any payment, that has an embargo period. Some journals have an embargo period for 2 years, 5 years. So what happens in that case? The citations are less because open access is available to everyone. In open access, we have to make a payment that is known as APC, Article Processing Charges. Some journals waive it off depending on where you stay. Mostly if you're staying in a lower middle income country like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, the chances are that you get a waiver. But for subscription, fortunately, there's no payment as such. It's available. To access a subscription journal, you can definitely contact a corresponding author, or sometimes your institution can also have an access for the subscription. And if you could see, there are a lot of journals, so you can try whichever journal you want to select for your manuscript, and then you can submit your manuscript there. Now, very important, follow submission guidelines. Every journal has its own citation guidelines and limits. If it says Harvard, better follow Harvard, even if it is problematic. Adhere to the word limit. Generally, the manuscript word limit ranges between 3,500 to 6,000, and the abstract word limit is between 200 to 300 words. For qualitative research, since I specialize in that, our word limit's a bit greater. Maybe for the manuscript, it's between 6,000 to 8,000. That is one thing. Now, important, who are you writing for? So see, the audience is never fixed. You must know that. You could have if your work is interdisciplinary, then you will have an interdisciplinary audience. I'll share an example here. Recently, I wrote a manuscript on home cooking. So, considering that manuscript, and I would say that manuscript will be read by researchers in different domains like home economics, food and nutrition, sociology, and public health nutrition. So make sure that you're very well aware that whom you're writing for, because if the audience is clear, then you will be able to write the manuscript well. Again, important point, peer review is not problem solving. I hope you're aware that different types of peer review. Today, I definitely cannot discuss that. There's single blind, double blind, and open. But yes, many people, they generally get stuck when they are writing discussion, and they just want to submit the manuscript. So that is the time I would say, think. If you think you have not written the draft well, go and rewrite, share it with your colleagues, but don't submit it for peer review. Why? Because see, do not submit your article because you're stuck and you're really looking for feedback. You can share your initial drafts with trusted friends and colleagues for that, rather than journals. It's not the responsibility of the editor or the peer reviewers to break your impasse. Yes, a very important point again in manuscript writing. There are too many typos and grammatical errors in the manuscript to go for peer review. I have, till date reviewed around 200 research articles. And when I see, grammatical errors and typographical errors, I am generally put off. I really get upset. And, the similar thing happens with the editor. So there's a high possibility, maybe your work is very innovative, something really interesting, but if the editor finds a lot of grammatical and typographical errors, there are high possibility that your article will not even enter peer review, it will straight away get rejected by the editor. So make sure you don't make those kind of errors. So for what do you do that? Submit polished and professional work. Careful proofreading is a must. It may seem obvious, but it certainly does not always happen. Do not just assume that copy editors, journal editors, peer reviewers will fix your errors. Therefore, there is a need for a fresh pair of eyes, trusted, to look at the final draft in order to minimize your typographical and grammatical errors, if any. Sharpen your abstract. Why? Abstract is the first impression of your manuscript. It has to be snappy. It's just not you're going to cut 5 sentences from introduction, no. It should stand on its own. It's the first impression, because when your manuscript goes to the journal, the editor will first have a look at the abstract and take a call on it, whether to reject or send it forward for peer review. So make it snappy and sharp. Definitely, before I move on to my 7th point, never include any references in abstract. So far, I have published 25 research articles in international journals. None of the journals have required any references in the abstract. So make sure that you don't add any abstracts. Now, how would the editor and peer reviewer assess your manuscript? Why am I discussing this? It is important because these are the 3 criteria you have to keep in mind while writing a manuscript. The first one is soundness of scholarship. What does that mean? That is your methodology sound. Have you collected your data rigorously? You've supported your arguments with evidence. And finally, your conclusions are not over-exaggerated or overstated. Second is your quality of style. It's your style of writing. There should be accuracy. There should be precision in your writing. It should read well. It should, and moreover, avoid using jargons unless explained. Avoid, again, unnecessary words. If you're making any statements, any claims, please back it up with strong evidence. Third point, coherence of argument. Now, what is this coherence of argument? You have to understand, when I was talking about, in the start itself, that you have to share both views, opposing views as well as similar views. Like, there has to be a balance in your argument. Of course, and what does coherence mean? It is like your article is flowing well smoothly. For example, if you're starting a paragraph, so the first sentence of the paragraph, the topic sentence, should actually capture the entire essence what your paragraph is speaking. There should be a smooth flow in your writing. It shouldn't be burpy or jumps in your writing. Therefore, while preparing the manuscript for publication, one should keep his or her criticism constructive, using professional and courteous language. Definitely, you need to hook your reader. So how do you do that? One needs to make the introduction immediately engaging and show why it is urgent at the outset. Ask 4 questions up front. Explain why are you addressing these issues? Why is it important? Note, identifying the knowledge gap is just not enough. I'm now going to tell you an example. I recently published 2 research articles on the role of Indian fathers in childcare and feeding. So of course, I definitely identified the gap in the literature saying that yes, role of fathers has not been discussed in the context of LMICs, but that's just not enough. We have to prove, I had to show why it is important to study the role of fathers. So why was it important? Because if you see in the lower middle income countries, there has been a societal shift in the society, a paradigm shift in the sense from joint family to nuclear families. So the role of fathers has become more important because first there were a lot of family members taking care of the child, but now it's just the husband and wife. And moreover, single parent homes, divorces, have, made I would say highlighted the role of father more than ever before right now. So definitely, it's just not identifying the gap, it is also why you're researching what the significance, the rationale has to be clarified in the introduction itself. Definitely talk about, how about your citational practices. Many of the researchers would say, okay, just cite last 5 years citations. I would say no, that means it's not in-depth. You have to have a broad range. What has happened in the history, like over the 50 years, and of course the recent citation. That will show you a comprehensive, view of your research article, and of course, is it just from one collection? No. Is it only journal articles? No, it has to be backed up with government reports, media reports if necessary. Now, how to structure your manuscript, very important. Look at how others write. Use a template and subheadings, particularly for methodology section when I mentioned study design, data collection, sample and settings, data analysis, interview guide, or your questionnaire. So these are the subheadings which will help you to write your manuscript. Of course, condense your background or your introduction, review of literature. Methodology has to be clearly explained and justified. Why? Because that was where I was talking about soundness of scholarship. See, why methodology is so important? Because I have peer reviewed, around, as I said, 200 papers. The maximum questions, whenever a reviewer raises is on methods. A method should be a very clear, crystal clear section. Because let's say, if I have done a study in India, if somebody in Bangladesh wants to replicate, he or she should just see my methodology and exactly replicate. So it should be so well written, clear, succinct. Data analysis should be relevant to study aims and outcomes. Very important. If my study objective just wants differences between male and females, so I will only use cross-tabs maybe. I don't have to do modeling for that because that's not the requirement or that's not my study objective. Conclusions are just not summaries. At the end of the article, you need to make sure that the reader leaves with a takeaway message, question, or a point. Very important, which all of us actually don't do. We have to rewrite, edit. I'll give you one short example. When I was doing my PhD dissertation, and for that discussion section, by then I had already published 5 papers in international journals, but still I had written my discussion section 8 times to get it approved by my supervisor. So never forget to rewrite, edit. Final leg of this presentation for today is how to structure the title. Title is very important. Why? Because this will also help in increasing your citations in the future, maybe. Title should be, I would say, concise, descriptive, and creative. Aim for clarity. And very important, it should have keywords which are going to emerge in database searches. For example, avoid using uncommon keywords. Use common keywords like adolescents over teenagers, home cooking over domestic cooking, because this will help your article to come up in database search if somebody is looking for that particular area of topic. And of course, if your article is relevant, that will definitely increase your chances of getting cited by that particular author. That's it for today. Maybe in the next class, I will take up, what happens once we submit the research article to the journal, different, possibilities, test, reject, major revision, minor revision, accept. That will be one. And of course, we can, discuss in detail different types of peer reviews. So thank you for today. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.